Welcome, Terri. Terri Libenson is the New York Times best-selling author of Emmie Friends series and cartoonist of the Reuben Award-winning, nationally syndicated comic strip, The Pajama Diaries. Prior to this, she was an award-winning humorous card writer and illustrator for American Greetings. Terri lives with her husband, 2 daughters, and a spirited puppy in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Terri.
Thank you. Hey. Well, hello. Welcome on this beautiful day. I'm Terri, and this is my book series, Emmie Friends. I'm going to delve into that. But first, I thought I would give you a little bit of background about myself. Let me grab my clicker. So let's go back in time a little bit, or a lot. So yes, that is me, age 13, 7th grade, bangs and all. And so the reason I chose this picture, one of probably like 3 pictures of myself from that age, is because I'm the same age as the characters in my stories. So all my characters are basically 13 years old and 7th grade. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I was very shy, very quiet, but also very artistic. So that was my favorite way to express myself, was through writing and drawing, but mainly through comics. I loved reading comics. I loved creating my own comics. In fact, I'll show you an example of one of those comics that I did back at that age. The only reason I know this was from that age was because it says so in the bottom right corner. You know what, I'm wondering if we should turn off the lights now that I think about it. Is it okay if I get the lights? Okay. So this is just one long continuous comic strip. I'm not going to read it. The joke is...
all the way off.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, the joke's terrible, so I'm not going to read this. Also, it'd take forever. But if any of you are familiar with the original Archie comics, you can kind of see what I was influenced by back then. I would go into my brother's bedroom and steal his Archie comics and a lot of Mad magazines and forget to give them back. He'd get really mad at me. But you can kind of see Betty and Veronica in these characters here. Someone also said they look like the characters from Scooby-Doo, so that would make sense. I watched a lot of cartoons back then. But anyway, so yeah, this was middle school. I kept up my love of comics throughout high school as well. Here's an example of more comics from then. I don't remember what grade this was. These are 4 separate comic strips. Again, not gonna read them. The jokes are still terrible. But you can see I was getting a little bit better at, artistically anyway. So all that was done in colored pencil and ink. It probably took me forever to do, but I probably had a great time doing it. And I kept up my love of comics throughout college as well. This is something a little bit different. You could see I was experimenting crazily through the years. This was from a campus magazine. That's why it's square in format. You know, kind of crude. You know, these are very embarrassing to look at now. but you know, gotta show the process. So I did a lot in college as far as comics was concerned. I was getting even more influenced by especially underground cartoonists like Linda Barry, Burke Breathed, people like that. So I did a comic strip for the campus newspaper. I was an illustration major, and I noticed I kept doing my assignments more and more in a cartoony fashion, so I definitely knew what direction I was heading in. I even did my senior project as a really big comic book. This thing was huge. Can't believe I did that. So anyway, yeah, I definitely wanted to be a cartoonist by this time. And I got my very first cartooning job in the most unlikely place possible. It was in a pizza place in my hometown in Pennsylvania. So the reasoning behind this was I knew the owner, and the owner asked me the summer after I graduated college if I would do these large-scale cartoon murals to decorate his pizza place, just throw them on the walls. So I did that. I did about 5 or 6 of these paintings. They were huge, probably about 2 or 3 tables could fit underneath that. That is Leonardo. He is the logo character of this pizza place. There he is, painting Italian food in Cubist style. This is my favorite one, Mona Lisa eating pizza. So these were really fun to do, and it took me all summer. But the problem was I got paid very, 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 very little for it. And that's when I realized, okay, I think I really need to apply to apply for some kind of regular paying job so I could afford to eat my own pizza. So that's what I did. And I ended up applying to greeting card companies, and I got hired by this one right here, not too far away from here in Cleveland, American Greetings, and I was hired as a greeting card writer and illustrator, but just for funny cards. So it was actually a great training ground as a cartoonist because I really honed my writing skills, definitely my editing skills, and I got to really experiment and play with illustration as well. So I'll show you a couple examples of what I did back then. I worked there for quite a long time, actually. I worked there for 22 years. Not in the building entirely. Once I had kids, I worked part-time, and then I had like a part-time, very, very small contract until I was just phased out. It took a long time. I'm surprised they kept me that long. But anyway, so I was hired mainly to do what they call alternative cards, and they could get pretty raunchy and off color. I used to write dirty greeting cards, you name it. So I had kind of a hard time finding samples that would be more family friendly, so I kind of dug through my batch and found a couple. This one was, I did not illustrate this, but I wrote it. Actually, a children's book author who's kind of local, also lives in Cleveland, Barry Gott, illustrated this because he worked for American Greetings back then as well. So it's just an example. Nurse, he's losing candy. Pinata Hospitals. This one, very family friendly one. This is actually from a greeting card line that I created called Skitch. It ran for a long time, for about 7 or 8 years. It did really well. It featured these little nebbish characters who never spoke. They just performed actions like this in this sequential art. This was a holiday card and one of the more successful ones. For all I know, it could still be working out there somewhere, but very fun to do. So those are just 2 examples of many, 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 many cards that I've done over the years. But while I was working for American Greetings, I had a different goal in mind, and that was to become a syndicated cartoonist, which is just another way of saying newspaper cartoonist, someone who does comic strips or single panel cartoons for the funny pages. Something that's probably not as desired now, but back then that was a huge goal for cartoonists. So it took me a long time to break into that. It took about 10 years on and off submitting things until I finally got my big break with this comic strip right here, The Pajama Diaries. So this was definitely a dream come true. Pajama Diaries ran internationally in newspapers from 2006 to 2020, right before the pandemic. My timing was really good. That's when I retired the strip. To tell you a little bit about it, it featured this woman right here. Her name is Jill Kaplan. She's basically my alter ego. But instead of being a cartoonist like I was, she was a freelance graphic designer who also happened to work at home, had 2 daughters and a husband just like me. And one of my favorite things about working on this strip was the fact that the characters aged in real time just like we do. So every year they would grow older, and that kind of kept the strip on track with my own life and kept the writing fresh for me. So I love that. It was very, very cathartic to write, and after a while I just had no shame, so I threw everything into that comic strip. So this is what I worked on at the time. It's called a Wacom Cintiq, and it's just a digital drawing tablet, a really nice one. I actually work on an upgraded one now, but they basically work the same way. And so I work completely digitally. When I started the comic strip, I actually I inked it myself and then scanned it into the computer and added the color then. But 2013, I got this device and went digital and never looked back. It expedited everything, made everything so much easier and faster, and yeah, I love it. And that's what I illustrate my books on as well. So I'll show you a couple examples of the comic strip. Again, my strip was more geared toward adults, not off color or anything, but definitely more parent-to-parent humor rather than to kids, but I did manage to find a couple that are more kid-friendly. These I will read. So that's Amy on the left. She is one of the child characters. She's about age 12 there. The only reason I know that is because she has braces. and that's Rob, that's Jill's husband. Amy's having trouble with her math homework. Ugh, I don't get this. Here, I'll help. Why do I have to do algebra anyway? When am I ever going to use this in my life? When you have to help your kids. Yeah, I always have to apologize to teachers whenever I read that one. This is a more recent one. Rob and I had a fight with Amy earlier. Think she's still mad at us? Let me check. Looks like it. She changed her relationship status to orphan. No. So those are just two examples of, again, many comic strips that I've done over the years. So, as I said, I retired the comic strip in 2020, and the entire reason being that this took over, Emmie and Friends, my book series. So, what was the story behind that? Well, quite a while ago, I had a cartoonist friend among other cartoonist friends who were getting books published, sort of in the vein of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, those kind of illustrated novels that are texty and have fun little drawings interspersed. And he told me that publishers at the time were really looking for more female authors with female protagonists, and he thought I might be perfect for that. And you know, I was really busy at the time, writing a daily comic strip. You're basically on a daily deadline and you don't get a lot of breaks. But as I thought about it a little more, I realized, well, you know what, why don't I try this? I don't have a deadline. I could take as long as I want to play around and just see if I enjoy it. So that's what I did. I've always wanted to write children's books anyway. I thought it would be more for a younger audience, like picture books. I never thought about writing middle grade books, but I went ahead and tried. And I found I really loved it. So I started with this book right here, Invisible Emmie. And I wrote it very unlike the way I write all my other books. That is, I didn't have any kind of outline or structure that I used. I just wanted to start writing and see where it took me. But I approached it very much the same way I approach my comic strip, that is autobiographically. But instead of writing from my point of view, as an adult, I decided to write from my point of view as a kid, because even though I don't remember the day-to-day stuff that I did back then, I definitely remember the feelings I had, because they were really big feelings. And as most of us experience when we're about 12 years old or 13 years old. So that became Emmie's voice, that point of view. Just like me, she's very shy and quiet and artistic, and she expresses herself through her art. So luckily, as I started writing, a story began to form. I thought of a really embarrassing incident that happened to me back in 5th grade, just when I needed a pivotal moment in the book. And so that became fodder for the story, and a great turning point. And I also thought of another main character to use in the book. I call it kind of a secondary main character. So the book became about one single event that happens over the course of one single day, and it's from the viewpoint of both of these girls. So it would be Emmie's and Katie's. And while I was writing, I wrote it as an illustrated novel completely. But eventually a publisher picked up the book, and after I acquired an agent, and the agent came up with the idea of using 2 different kinds of artistic styles for each of the characters. So that's where it became more of a hybrid book. So Emmie's chapters were told in that illustrated novel style, and Katie's chapters were told as a graphic novel. So it was a really cool way to differentiate the two characters visually. So the book did really well, and I had a 2-book contract, so I ended up doing the second book, Positively Izzy. I thought I was going to continue Emmie's stories, but I realized, like, really her story was finished for now. I didn't really want to approach her again. I'd rather switch up the characters. So that's when I decided to take her best friend, Brianna, and turn her into a main character. She was already a pretty well-developed character in the story, so I was able to use her, and then I came up with a completely made-up new character to act as that second point of view, and that was, of course, Izzy. And again, like in Emmie, the story revolves around a single event that happens in one single day. I kind of broke that format throughout the rest of the books, but I definitely continued it with this one. And that book did really well, so luckily I was able to do more. And I found that I really started to love writing for this little lakefront middle school universe, and I really enjoyed changing up the characters. Definitely poses the biggest challenge for me as a writer, but also one of the greatest joys, because once you break through with a character and come up with their personality, it's so much fun and keeps it so interesting. So the third book, Just Jamie, was great because I was able to take 2 background characters who were kind of like comic relief characters. I called them the Gossip Girls, and I decided to bring them into the forefront and flesh them out and make them real people, and realish people. And then for the 4th book, Becoming Brianna, I kind of broke the format there. And instead of having 2 different characters, I just had one, Brianna. I brought her back for this book. It's kind of broke the mold in regards to subject matter too, because this book is all about Brianna having a bat mitzvah. And instead of the story going back and forth between the 2 characters, it would go back and forth between the past and the present. So the past would be like months leading up to the day of the bat mitzvah, and the present chapters, which were the graphic novel chapters, all took place on the day of the event. Uniquely You is what I call a supplementary book. It's a cross between a journal and activity book. It's so much fun. I had the best time creating that, and grown-ups like it too. So in case you're ever looking for something fun to do on a road trip, well, your kids or you, that's the book. Truly Tyler was the first book that starred a boy, and I rotated Tyler in. He was Emmie's crush from the first book, and this was my first pandemic book, and that was the biggest challenge. It was the hardest book for me to write. I think I rewrote it from like in entirety about 4 times until finally caught on. And once it did, it gushed out of me, so it was great. So that one stars both Tyler and Emmie, and that one's a really cool book because it actually has a book within a book. It features a comic book that the 2 characters create together, and I have it woven throughout the story. And then finally, Remarkably Ruby is my latest one that came out this past May. And again, I brought a background character and put her in the forefront, and I'll talk a little bit about that now. So this is a story of Ruby, who is front and center there, and Mia, the one hiding her eyes in the background. And so Ruby she is another one of those comic relief characters, and if any of you are familiar with any of my books, she's always the character who's running to the bathroom in the background, shouting out her latest meal, usually something very fiber-rich, and kind of knocking people down along the way. Actually, this book explains the background of that. But so I fleshed her out and made her a lot more real. And then, of course, I introduced sort of her foil, Mia, in this story. So just to give you a little bit of personality descriptions of the 2 characters, Ruby is what I would call extremely socially awkward. Not really shy per se, but just always says the wrong thing at the wrong time, even though she means well. She is a lot taller than the rest of the students and kind of sticks out like a sore thumb as she thinks. And that kind of makes her even more awkward because she doesn't want any attention on her whatsoever. She's not a joiner as far as activities go. She just likes to kind of live in her own world. But she does have a gift. She has the gift of writing. That's how she really expresses herself. So that would be through short stories and journaling, but mostly through poetry. And here she's actually pictured doing a poetry slam at the school talent show. So it's great because her English teacher tries to get her to break out of her shell a little bit and join the brand new poetry club. So you see Ruby start to kind of come into herself a little bit and make some friends. With Mia in the background, she's kind of opposite in nature. So she's definitely a joiner of activities. She's very into school spirit and she's running for class president. She's a year ahead of Ruby, so she's in 8th grade. And she has a boyfriend, and she's pretty popular. But she also is extremely type A, very organized, very much a perfectionist, and likes to have things her way. And you see her as she goes through the election process, becoming a little more and more obsessed with it as she goes along. And unfortunately, she starts to ignore the feelings of her boyfriend and her friends and get a little bit too wrapped up in the whole process. So those are the two characters, different stories, but the relationship between them is sort of in the overarching story. And their background is that Ruby and Mia are two ex-best friends, and one of them has moved on from the relationship and the other has not. And so all those dynamics play out throughout the course of the story. And there's a great surprise ending. I'm not gonna even come close to telling you about that, but it adds another layer to this whole thing. So I absolutely loved writing Ruby. This story completely spilled out of me, which doesn't happen all that often, and it was definitely a joy to write, and hopefully a joy for everybody to read. So let me switch gears now. I'll tell you a little bit about the process of writing these books. As I mentioned, I wrote the first book, Invisible Emmie, very differently than how I write all the others. And now that I'm on a yearly deadline, I have to have one book out every May. And I have to, not only do I have to write it, I have to illustrate it. And so I have to really make sure I've got this process in hand. And so I've come up with an entire structure process, and this is where I go full type A, just like the character Mia. I don't actually begin here. This is just an example of the typed manuscript. I go back a little bit and I start out with 2 different outlines for each of the 2 characters, because most of the stories are about 2 different characters that kind of overlap. And it just helps me. I usually know the ending before I even begin the story. And once I have the outlines down pat and sort of I also type out a short synopsis of the story as well. I'll go out and just start writing. I'll start writing the manuscript. So this is an example of Ruby's prologue, and it looks really boring. You don't see any artwork in here whatsoever. And the reason for that is when I first write the story, there's so many changes that happen over the course of writing. There's lots of edits, and sometimes I have to start the story over from scratch if it's not working. So if I have any artwork in there, usually that has to get changed as well or scrapped. So it's just way more work than I want, and trust me, I learned that the hard way. So instead what I do is I indicate where the art is going to go and what it's going to be, usually in pretty full detail in the red type like that. And that just, that makes it easier for me to go, because it doesn't interrupt the flow of writing, because usually what happens is the art kind of bridges the writing, so I have to make sure I do indicate what the art is going to be like. So eventually, hopefully, I'll have everything approved, and once the manuscript is pretty much approved, I will go on to add art, but I don't do final art yet. What I do is called rough art, which is just these fun little doodly pencil sketches that I scan in and I plug right into the manuscript. And the reason I don't do the final art is, again, usually a lot of changes happen, and it's a lot easier for me to tweak these little doodles than it is for me to tweak the final art. So let me take you through an example of one of those illustrations. Oh, but first, here I am working on Ruby. This is a really grainy photo, sorry about that, really pixelated one. But just get an idea, that's my new Cintiq. It works really the same way as my old one does, but it's just a lot more, it's just cool looking. And you know, a lot more state of the art. So all digital. So let's go back to the beginning of one of those illustrations. This is a pencil sketch from the prologue of Ruby, and you can see it's just a very rough drawing. And then I'll go onto my Cintiq and I'll clean it up, and that is just black line art. So you can see it still retains kind of that doodly quality, but it's a lot more polished looking. And of course, have to do the most fun thing of all and add color. Still love coloring, that has not changed over the years. So that's what it looks like complete, and then this is what it looks like. This is just a digital rendition of the book in its final form, and you can see the artwork right here. This time it's stacked, and that's just because it fits the page a lot better. And it's the same kind of process with the graphic novel too. So this is just a rough pencil sketch of one of Mia's chapters. These are her two best friends. Mia's not actually in this one. And then I'll go onto the digital drawing tablet and I'll do the final black line artwork and then add the color. And I absolutely love doing the color in the graphic novel chapters because usually I'm using brighter colors and I get to play around with highlights and shadows and more details, and it's so much fun. I also like to play around with the panels too, as you can see here. That's a 2-page spread from the book. So that is the process in a nutshell. So now I'll end this with some examples of perks of being an author, because I think there are many, and there are a lot that are a little more expected and a little more unexpected, I think, and of course none of them ever get old. So for instance, this is so cool. My first book, Invisible Emmie, came out in about, I want to say 17 or 18 different languages. So it's such a joy to see your work get translated into different languages. These are just 3 examples. The one on the left is German. That really great looking cover in the middle, I love that cover, that's French, and the one on the right is Spanish. I have a mother who is Turkish, and when my books started coming out in Turkish, she got such a thrill. And she even pointed out that they laugh differently in the books in Turkish. Another great perk is having your books get into book fairs. So this is an example of one of the more well-known book fairs that go to schools, scholastics book fairs. You can even see signage from Emmie and Friends in the right-hand corner up there behind those very adorable children. So it's great because it really gets books into the hands of kids sort of on their own turf when they're not buying, pens and toys and bookmarks and things. And of course, just seeing your stuff out in the wild. This was when Truly Tyler came out. This is just at a local Barnes & Noble. So it was just such a thrill just seeing all those books on display like that. I mean, that never gets old. And of course, just being able to speak in front of real live audiences, which we haven't done in a while. It's so nice. You get the energy and the great questions from kids. Just love doing that. And of course, lastly, but the most important perk of all is just having your books read and enjoyed by readers everywhere, any way they want. Haven't tried this one yet, but the day is young. So I have to hand it to these young readers because they make this one of the best jobs in the world, and it will definitely never get old for me. And I've been so blessed and overjoyed to have my dream jobs as a cartoonist and as a greeting card writer, and And finally, so far, my third act as an author. And I think this one is my favorite because, I mean, it's kids. There's nothing better. So thank you so much, everybody. And now, let's get to the good part. I am going to give you a little demonstration of drawings of characters from Remarkably Ruby. So let me grab my pen and I'll do 2 drawings. First, I'll draw Ruby so you can kind of see the process. Although I'm going to, thank you. I'm going to preface this by saying that normally I work so small, like about that big. So when I work larger scale like this, they tend to get out of proportion. So these drawings can become really humorous. So we'll see. But I usually start with the eyes. And by the way, I'm so bad at talking and drawing at the same time, but here we go. We'll do it anyway. And I always tell kids that it's okay to draw any way they want. They could start from the feet up. I've actually seen that quite a few times, where they start from the feet and then draw the head. I don't think I could do that. So like I said, this is Ruby performing, sort of doing a poetry slam at the talent show, which is why she's holding a mic. And this is going to be a really quick sketch. And I don't know what it is, but about Ruby, but ever since I started drawing her, she's always dressed up in some sort of heart theme. I don't know why, but she just loves hearts. I even have like a heart-shaped hole in her jeans. I don't know if I'm going to draw the very detailed Converses that she has on. It's like she's all dressed up for this talent show. I'll do my best. Usually this is where things get really out of proportion when I draw the feet. So that is Ruby. And you always have to sign your work. Oops, forgot she's wearing jeans, gotta draw the details. Okay, I think I got everything. All right. Very quick sketch of Ruby. Oops, oh, I forgot. These are like giant Post-its. Forgetting you could just rip it off. We'll stick Ruby right here. And let's do one more of Mia. So the graphic novel chapters, I usually get a little more detailed. They're usually a little more polished looking, although they're both pretty much the same in here. I forgot what her nose looks like. It's been a while since I've drawn Mia. So in that image, she looks kind of mad or mean, but this is actually supposed to just be a picture of her where she's feeling very determined. So I want to say she's not a mean girl. She's just very, on top of things, like I said, organized. She does like to have things go her way, so she can be a little bit like that. I have quite a bit of Mia in me. I'm not really pushy or anything, but I'm definitely a perfectionist and very organized. Not that it always works out for me, but oh, might not have room for her feet. I'll just do what I can. Okay, I got out of drawing her feet. So that is Mia. And that is what happens when I draw really fast. Not too bad. Actually, these didn't really get out of proportion. I've drawn some really bizarre ones, but and half the time the kids do a much better job than I do. So anyway, that is it. That kind of concludes everything. I hope you guys had fun. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to take. I'm ready to take. Okay.